Hello, my name is Liam Smith.
And about 52 years ago, I came home after an exhausting day working as a refrigeration technician. That night, something unexplainable happened to me. I spent hours on my knees in front of the image of Our Lady of Fátima that my grandmother had left me, praying with an intensity I had never experienced before. My words came out as desperate pleas, begging for guidance for the problems that were overwhelming my family at the time. My wife was gravely ill, my children were struggling in school, and I felt completely lost, not knowing which direction to take. After hours of prayer, I finally fell asleep right there, lying on the cold living room floor. What happened next changed the course of my life forever. Suddenly, I found myself standing before a golden and gentle light, unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't ordinary light, but something that radiated peace, love, and an ancient wisdom that transcended any human understanding. I instinctively knew I was in the presence of Our Lady of Fátima. Her presence was so powerful that my whole body trembled, not with fear, but with the profound reverence I never thought was possible to feel. She did not speak with words, but I understood perfectly each message she conveyed directly to my heart. During that transcendent experience, I witnessed extraordinary visions that unfolded before my eyes like a celestial movie, showing future events that would not only mark my personal life, but also affect millions of people around the world. One of the first visions revealed to me occurred in 2015, when I clearly saw images of massive storms forming over the Chicago area. In the vision, I observed devastating winds sweeping through the city, causing massive destruction on a scale never seen before in American meteorological history. I woke up that morning completely transformed and immediately wrote down every detail I had witnessed. I began sharing this vision with close friends and family, speaking about it during prayer meetings at our local parish. Many looked at me with skepticism, others with pity, thinking I was going through a nervous breakdown due to family stress. However, in March 2016, exactly as I had seen in the vision, a series of Category 5 tornadoes struck the Chicago metropolitan area, causing damages estimated in the billions and leaving hundreds of thousands of people homeless. The images I saw on the news were identical to those Our Lady had shown me months earlier. After this first event came true, my life was never the same again. People from all over the region began showing up at my house, wanting to know how I had predicted the tragedy with such accuracy. Local journalists sought me out, radio stations invited me for interviews, and even meteorological authorities wanted to speak with me to understand the phenomenon. I always answered with humility that it wasn't me who had any special gift, but that Our Lady of Fátima had blessed me with these revelations so I could warn people about the difficult times ahead. Many were confused by my explanation, especially those who didn't share the same faith, but I knew in my heart I was fulfilling a sacred mission that had been entrusted to me. About 3 years ago, I had an even more intense and disturbing experience than all the previous ones. This time, I found myself in a place I immediately recognized as the center of Las Vegas, surrounded by a desperate crowd running in every direction. Panic was thick in the air, and I could feel the terror dominating everyone around me. People were constantly looking up at the sky, pointing at something quickly approaching from the western horizon. I myself was seized by an overwhelming fear, completely different from anything I had ever experienced in my previous visions. This wasn't just a passive vision where I observed events unfolding. This time, I was fully immersed in the experience, feeling every emotion, every racing heartbeat, every drop of cold sweat running down my face as I participated in that apocalyptic scene. When I finally managed to lift my eyes to the sky, I saw something that left me completely paralyzed with horror. A gigantic mass of twisted metal and fire was descending from the heavens toward Earth, spinning wildly as it broke into smaller pieces that glowed like deadly falling stars. It was a space station or perhaps a colossal satellite, that had lost its orbit and was now plummeting toward our planet at a terrifying speed. The object was so massive that it partially blocked the late afternoon sun, creating sinister shadows dancing over the city. I could hear the deafening sound of its atmospheric entry, a metallic roar that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the sky. Smaller fragments were already hitting the outskirts of the city, creating smoking craters and setting everything around them on fire. The main impact occurred a few miles away, but it was still devastating. The ground shook with indescribable violence, throwing all of us to the ground like rag dolls. Towering buildings swayed dangerously, windows shattered in glittering cascades, and the sound of destruction was deafening. It felt as if the Earth's very crust was cracking beneath our feet, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was witnessing the end of the world. But then, something even more frightening happened. A wave of intense heat swept through the city, followed by a burst of radiation that I could feel burning my skin. Even within the vision, people around me began to collapse. Others screamed in agony, and I realized that it wasn't just the crash of the space object causing this devastation. It was also the release of radioactive materials, spreading death throughout the region. Suddenly, just like in my previous experiences, I felt as if invisible hands were lifting me out of the chaos unfolding below. Now, floating in the air, I could see the full scale of the catastrophe. The city of Las Vegas was quickly becoming a radioactive exclusion zone. Toxic clouds spread in all directions, carried by the desert winds, contaminating vast areas of Nevada and dangerously approaching California. I saw military convoys closing in on the city, establishing quarantine perimeters, while helicopters desperately evacuated survivors from the hardest-hit areas. What shocked me most was realizing that this wasn't an isolated tragedy, but the beginning of a series of catastrophic events that would spread across the entire United States. In the vision, I saw other cities being hit by similar disasters, as if a curse had been unleashed upon the entire nation. When I finally woke up from that terrifying experience, my body was drenched in sweat, and I was trembling uncontrollably. For the first time in all my mystical encounters, I felt a deep fear about what I had seen. Unlike previous visions, which always came with a sense of peace and divine purpose, this one left me with a desperate sense of urgency. I immediately grabbed pen and paper and began feverishly writing down every detail I could remember. Every image, every sound, every emotion was carefully recorded. But even before I finished writing, I clearly heard a soft voice echo through the room, the same maternal voice that had always accompanied me during these supernatural encounters. The voice spoke a single word that made my blood run cold: Skyfall. At first, I didn't understand the meaning of that English term, but something deep within my soul knew that this word held a prophetic meaning of monumental importance for the future of humanity. In the days that followed that terrifying vision, I dedicated myself to researching the word Skyfall and any information related to space accidents that might connect with what I had seen. I discovered that there are hundreds of satellites and space stations orbiting our planet, many of which are classified as space debris and pose a constant threat of uncontrolled re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. What alarmed me most was learning that several space agencies around the world keep this information strictly confidential, classifying most data about orbiting objects as national security. I began to suspect that authorities knew far more about the imminent risks than they were willing to reveal to the general public. During my investigation, I managed to contact several aerospace experts, including Dr. Michael Patterson, a former NASA engineer who had worked for 25 years in the Space Debris Monitoring Program. Dr. Patterson, who now works as an independent consultant in Denver, shared disturbing information with me about a top-secret project known as Operation Clean Slate, a joint initiative among several world powers to conceal from the public the true extent of the space debris crisis. According to him, there are at least 43 large objects in decaying orbits that pose direct threats to life on Earth, and the official forecasts of their re-entry trajectories are deliberately vague to avoid mass panic. I also established contact with Dr. Sarah Chen, an atmospheric physicist working at the Arecibo Radio Astronomy Observatory in Puerto Rico. She confided that, for the past 3 years, she's been detecting anomalous patterns in Earth's ionosphere, changes that could be caused by massive objects with high levels of radiation in unstable orbits. Her findings were systematically ignored or censored by official agencies, and she was even threatened with termination if she continued publishing her data. Dr. Chen showed me charts and analyses that supported her theories, including evidence that at least one of the objects in question contains nuclear material of unknown origin, possibly linked to secret military experiments from past decades. The most astonishing revelation came through my conversation with retired Colonel James Morrison, who served for 15 years in the Aerospace Strategic Command in Colorado Springs. Colonel Morrison, who held ultra-classified security clearance, revealed to me the existence of a military protocol known as Scenario 7, specifically developed to deal with catastrophic re-entry events involving space objects over American territory. This protocol includes detailed plans for mass evacuation, the establishment of radioactive quarantine zones, and even the possible declaration of martial law in affected areas. What is most alarming is that, according to Colonel Morrison, this protocol has been quietly activated at least 3 times in the past 10 years, always in response to threats that were never made public. All of this research led me to one terrifying conclusion. The vision I had of Las Vegas was not merely a possible future, it was an inevitable event that authorities already know will happen. Based on the scientific data I gathered and the privileged information shared by these experts, I calculated that the catastrophic event I witnessed in my vision will most likely occur on September 17, 2028, a date that matches precisely with the mathematical projections for the decaying orbit of a specific space object known only by its military designation, Prometheus 7. This object, according to my sources, is an experimental space station secretly launched in 1992, equipped with nuclear reactors and advanced military technology that has never been officially acknowledged by any government. The characteristics of this object are truly frightening. Prometheus 7 is approximately 280 feet long and weighs about 990,000 pounds, including its still active nuclear reactors. Its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere would create a fireball visible for hundreds of miles, and the impact would release radiation equivalent to dozens of nuclear power plants exploding simultaneously. If, as I foresee based on my vision, this object crashes into the Las Vegas metropolitan area, the consequences will be devastating not only for Nevada but for the entire American Southwest. Conservative estimates suggest that at least 2 million people would need to be permanently evacuated, and radioactive contamination would render an area of nearly 20,000 square miles uninhabitable for at least 100 years. What terrifies me most is not only the scale of the physical destruction, but the social and economic implications that would follow. Las Vegas is a vital economic hub, and its destruction would cause a chain reaction that could collapse global financial markets. Additionally, the need to relocate millions of radioactive refugees would trigger an unprecedented humanitarian crisis in American history. State and federal governments are simply not prepared to deal with a disaster of this magnitude. And I suspect the official response would be chaotic and inadequate, further increasing the suffering of the victims. However, as terrifying as this vision of the future may be, I must also share that Our Lady of Fátima didn't show me only destruction and despair. During that same mystical experience, after witnessing the devastation of Las Vegas, I was transported to an entirely different scene. I saw millions of people around the world who, in the face of the impending catastrophe, were kneeling in fervent prayer. I saw entire families gathered in their homes, communities organizing prayer vigils in public squares, and even world leaders secretly turning to faith in moments of absolute desperation. It was a profoundly moving vision of how humanity, when confronted with its own mortality and vulnerability, instinctively seeks a connection with the divine and rediscovers values long forgotten in the rush of modern life. This part of the vision was closely connected to the biblical prophecies found in the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 9, where St. John describes catastrophic events that precede the glorious manifestation of the heavenly kingdom on earth. When the apostle speaks of stars falling from the sky and smoke rising like from a great furnace, I firmly believe he was prophetically referring to events like the fall of Prometheus 7. These are not just poetic metaphors, but literal descriptions of occurrences that Our Lady of Fátima knew would mark the final days. What comforts me deeply is knowing that these tribulations serve as signs of hope for all the faithful, indicating that divine intervention is near and that we will soon witness the complete transformation of reality as we know it in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus Christ taught his disciples about the signs that would precede his glorious second coming. He specifically instructed, "When you see these things happening, lift up your heads, because your redemption is near." This passage resonates deeply in my heart every time I reflect on the visions I have received. The fall of Prometheus 7 and the devastation that follows do not represent the end of hope, but rather the beginning of a new era of spiritual renewal for all humanity. For those who believe in the doctrine of the rapture of the righteous, this is extraordinarily joyful news, as it means the true followers of Christ will be spared from the worst parts of this tribulation, being taken up in glory before total destruction unfolds on earth. Regardless of the various theological interpretations of the end times, all sincere Christians must see this moment as a unique opportunity for evangelization and testimony. St. Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans that he was not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. This transformative power, this divine force capable of softening hardened hearts and bringing hope to the hopeless, is exactly what the world will need during the dark days ahead. Everyone who hears this message has the sacred responsibility to share it with family, friends, co-workers, and even strangers, because we never know who might be ready to receive the seed of faith that could blossom into eternal salvation. During my most intense prayers after receiving these revelations, Our Lady of Fátima showed me something that filled my heart with unwavering hope. I saw clearly that just as God spared the city of Nineveh when its people repented after the preaching of the prophet Jonah, there is a real possibility that the predicted catastrophe could be softened or even entirely avoided through collective prayer and true national repentance. In the book of Joel, chapter 2, the Lord promises that if the people turn to Him with all their hearts, with fasting, weeping, and mourning, He will show compassion and turn away His wrath. "Rend your hearts and not your garment," says the prophet, indicating that what is required is genuine inner change, not just hollow external gestures. There is a powerful biblical precedent for believing that divine intervention can entirely change the course of prophetic events when humanity demonstrates sincere repentance. King Hezekiah, when confronted with the prophecy of his imminent death, prayed fervently and had his life extended by 15 years. Similarly, when King Josiah led a spiritual reform in Judah, God postponed the promised judgment upon the nation. These examples give me hope that if we can awaken a genuine movement of prayer and repentance on a national and international scale, we might be able to influence the destiny of Prometheus 7 and alter its fatal trajectory. One of Europe's most respected astrophysicists, Dr. Hans Müller, from the European Southern Observatory in Chile, recently published a fascinating scientific article exploring the possibility that gravitational forces not yet fully understood could significantly alter the orbit of large space objects. According to his calculations, there is a very specific time window between June and August 2028, during which Prometheus 7 will pass through a region of space where the combined gravitational influence of Jupiter and Saturn could theoretically deflect its path, sending it into a safe orbit around the Sun, or possibly even ejecting it completely from the solar system. Dr. Muller admits the odds are statistically low, but not impossible, and curiously mentioned in an interview that some kind of extraordinary, almost miraculous intervention would be required for this deflection to occur at exactly the right moment. That is why I decided to share this testimony here on the YouTube channel, Stories of Fátima, a call to prayer for the end times, to offer solid hope based on biblical promises that God hears the prayers of His people and can change the course of history when His children cry out for mercy with sincere and repentant hearts. Over the 4 years I dedicated to researching this topic, I had the privilege of interviewing hundreds of people who experienced supernatural events similar to mine. I met a retired nurse from Phoenix who had visions of devastating earthquakes in California, a former military pilot from Seattle who repeatedly dreamed of tsunamis hitting the West Coast, and even an elementary school teacher from Texas who received revelations about solar storms that would disrupt all global communication. What impressed me most was discovering that all of these people, from completely different backgrounds, received the same core message in their mystical experiences. The catastrophic events to come are a final divine call for humanity to return to eternal spiritual values before it's too late. I also documented dozens of verifiable cases where collective prayer resulted in measurable changes in natural phenomena. In 2021, a Catholic community in Oklahoma organized a 9-day novena specifically praying for a Category 5 hurricane to change course and spare their city. Meteorologists were stunned when, on the final day of the novena, the hurricane suddenly lost strength and shifted direction, dissolving completely over the ocean. In 2023, after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the San Francisco region, an interfaith group of Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox Christians organized a 72-hour prayer vigil asking for the aftershocks to stop. Seismologists from the University of California confirmed that, contrary to all scientific predictions, seismic activity in the region ceased abruptly at the exact moment the vigil concluded. These examples prove that there is a real and measurable connection between the fervent prayers of the faithful and supernatural intervention in natural events. That is why my most urgent appeal is for every person who hears this message to commit to at least 30 minutes of daily prayer over the coming months, specifically asking Our Lady of Fátima to intercede with her Son to divert Prometheus 7 from its current path. I suggest these prayers be offered each day at 3 p.m., the traditional hour of Divine Mercy, and that they include the Rosary, prayers for world leaders, and specific pleas for the conversion of scientists and military personnel who hold knowledge of this space threat. In addition to individual prayer, it is essential that we organize a coordinated movement of prayer groups at both national and international levels. I am proposing that beginning this coming May, the month traditionally dedicated to Our Lady, all parishes, prayer communities, and Catholic groups around the world dedicate their weekly meetings exclusively to this intention. We need at least 1 million people praying simultaneously, creating a spiritual force so powerful that heaven cannot ignore our pleas. Again and again, the Scriptures show us that when God's people unite in prayer for a common purpose, mountains literally move, and the impossible becomes possible through direct divine intervention. I want to make it absolutely clear that this is not a message of despair but one of extraordinary hope. Our Lady of Fátima did not grant me these visions so I could spread fear, but so I could awaken sleeping hearts and mobilize a prayer army like the world has never seen. I firmly believe that if we can gather enough people in sincere prayer and true repentance, we will not only prevent the catastrophe of Prometheus 7, but also usher in a new era of peace and spiritual prosperity for all of humanity. The visions showed me that after this time of tribulation and intense prayer, an extraordinary period of renewal will come in which people will rediscover family values, the importance of community, and above all, the absolute necessity of keeping God at the center of their daily lives. So my final appeal is simple but urgent. Do not let this message be just another interesting story you heard. Let it be the catalyst for a deep personal transformation in your spiritual life. Start today. Pray daily for the intercession of Our Lady of Fátima. Organize prayer groups in your community. Share this message with everyone you know. And most importantly, live each day with the awareness that we are in the final times, and that our actions and prayers today will determine the fate of humanity in the years to come. Time is running out quickly, but there is still hope if we act together in faith, in prayer, and in the unconditional love that Our Lady has always shown for all her children around the world. Dear friends who made it to the end of this spiritual journey with us, I want you to know that your presence here is no coincidence, but part of a divine plan for this message to reach exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. If this story touched your heart in any way, if it awakened in you a desire for deeper prayer or an urgency to draw closer to Our Lady of Fátima, please do not keep these feelings to yourself. Subscribe to our channel to keep receiving messages of hope and spiritual guidance for these challenging times we're living through. In the comments below, share with us. Have you ever had a prayer experience that brought a clear answer from heaven? Have you ever felt Our Lady interceding in a special way in your life? Your testimony may be exactly what someone else needs to hear to strengthen their own faith. Also, tell us your own stories of faith, miracles you have witnessed, or moments of personal breakthrough where you felt the hand of God powerfully at work. Every story is a beacon of hope for someone going through hardship, reminding them that our God is a God of miracles, and that Our Lady never abandons her children. And please, write in the comments what this message stirred in your heart. What kind of prayer commitment are you willing to make? How do you plan to contribute to this global movement of prayer through the intercession of Our Lady of Fátima? Your words could inspire thousands of others to join this chain of faith, one that may literally change the fate of the world. Share this video with family members, friends, co-workers, and especially with those you know are in need of hope and spiritual direction. Together we can create a wave of prayer and faith that reaches the heavens and brings about the divine intervention our time so desperately needs. May Our Lady of Fátima bless each and every one of you and your families abundantly.